one lesson I learned that had stayed with me for years from Johnny Thunders, of all people, where we were at a sound check at Max's one afternoon, and I couldn't get in tune. And this was before we had tuners. Nobody had those yet. They had big tuners, but nobody could afford them. So I couldn't get in tune. And Johnny looks at my guitar. I had a Les Paul custom, and he says, "Well, you're stringing it wrong." And I'm like, Mr. Fucking Tuning is gonna, because this guy, he could be sloppy as hell, and make me sound like Alvin Lee or someone. But he showed me how to restring a guitar the proper way. And I've done it ever since that day. And I've never had that kind of problem again, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And I thought that was really profound, because even then he had such a reputation of being really sloppy and inconsistent. But when I see that guy play when he wasn't too high, he was fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
I just something. It was something to witness. In fact, the Heartbreakers themselves were like one of those bands that if you could catch them on a good night, it's like 1 out of every 10. You were amazed. You were amazed. I mean, they played so well. I mean, it was just amazing how well they played.
Would you say, from your observation, would you say that Johnny Thunders or Walter Lure was like pulling the train down the tracks? Or like, would Johnny Thunders be like a liability at times? Like, would they really have to pull his weight?
Yeah, sometimes but they all were at times. I mean, they were all using. Jerry was using a lot. Billy Rath was into speed. He was the only guy anybody knew at the time that used speed, because that was always a West Coast thing. But sometimes John would be in such a condition where they'd unplug him. They'd have to unplug him. And talk about antagonizing the audience. He was a master at that. He was just like, he'd piss people off like you can't believe. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, somebody's gonna kill this guy someday. So again, though, they were equal in a sense of when one guy fell down, the other guys picked up the slack, which is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. That's
what you do in a band. I mean, not everybody has a good night every night. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And you're especially challenged like that if you're heavily using drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Like we were in those days. I mean, for me, I was, a total wreck. I mean, Johnny wanted to take me on tour, and this is I've known John for a few years already. We'll hang out, and he asked me if I wanted to go do this, and I was told to go do it. The guy Peter Crowley, who used to run Max's, said, "This is a good opportunity. You got to go do this." And when I went up to see him on 30th Street, I got like flustered or something. I don't know what it was. So Johnny said, "Let's go take a walk." And that was a euphemism for let's go take some drugs. So we went and got some drugs and came back. And I made the mistake of trying to do as much heroin as he did. And he had this unbelievable capacity to take drugs. It was phenomenal.
Like a tolerance?
Like a tolerance that was unbelievable. And when I did that, I couldn't play. And so I didn't get to go on the tour. And someone told me once that I have the dubious distinction of the only guy kicked out of the Heartbreakers for shooting too much dope. But when I look back at it philosophically, I really believe that God put his finger on me that night. and said, yeah, I'm not doing this. Because I would have been in a situation where there would have been no restrictions around me.
Yeah.
And I would have been out of New York with no restrictions, unlimited amounts of everything. And what would have happened was that I would either died or got locked up or put on a plane back home in shame. So I probably would have died because I had no sense of moderation at all. So in a way, he did me a favor. I guess. Maybe.
So,
I mean, that's where he is now. I mean, the way he ended up.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a rough path to
I
take.
saw him 2 weeks before he died, and he was real flush with money because they had just come from Japan from a series of gigs that did really well, and he had a shitload of money. And when they got back to New York, he disappeared for a few days. No one knew where he was, and then he resurfaced. And then I saw him one night, and he was moving to New Orleans. And I said, "Why are you going to New Orleans? It's like really hot there in the summer." I mean, and he said, "Oh man, there's music there all the time. It's great." And he said, "You should come." And I don't want to go down there. So, and then it was a week later, I find out he's dead in New Orleans, and I go, "Well, there you go." And it's funny too. When I went to New Orleans with Walter a few years ago, all the music I heard were these crappy cover bands everywhere. I lived right on Bourbon Street, and every bar had a band playing Freebird or some kind of thing. So maybe he knew about a part in New Orleans that I didn't know, but from what I saw, it was a tourist trap. It was a shithole. It was a terrible place. It was just, I was there in April, and so it wasn't terribly hot yet. But I said, man, I bet in the summer this place really smells bad. There's bars there that haven't closed their doors in 30 years.
Yeah.
Imagine that. 30 years, some of them. They just mop around people.
Yeah.